Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Jesse, what do we have?
First up is from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. Has anyone on the panel conducted a 24-hour playback stream using Mimolive or Ecamm Live? Any tips I should look out for before attempting?
I haven't done it with Mimolive, and so what I'm assuming what you want to do is load a series of videos together and then play them out, or play one video in a loop. And Mimolive should be able to do that. I have less experience with Ecamm, but Mimo should be able to make that possible. The main thing is make sure nothing else is running on the computer. So you want to turn off notifications. You want to turn off anything else that could be distracting to it. It should work just fine, but you want to treat the computer that's doing that play out like a appliance, that it's just doing the one thing that it's supposed to do. Again, usually the long-term ones that we've done have been using something like Softrons on the air that goes into a hardware encoder, and then we play it out for sometimes days and weeks. In some cases, our elemental encoders, we will run those for. One time I ran it for 2 weeks by accident, just forgot to turn it off. So those are the kind of things that you can do with an encoder that's dedicated to this. You can also, you definitely can do it inside of Mimolive. This is also something that might be really easy to put into the cloud, into using Media Connect. Use some media services there, so that you don't have to worry about your local connection. So that's another thing to kind of consider when you look at these. But Mimo or Ecamm should be able to do it. David Paskin would probably be better answer the Ecamm question, but I can tell you Mimolive should be able to do it. But I would definitely test early and test often. And Guy Cochran says that he said, we've been running 8 copies of Mimolive on one Mac Studio 24 hours a day since May. So there you go. So this probably should be okay. Let's go to the next question.
The next question is from Mariella Shusha Mira. We had an Insta360 Link die and a teleprompter at school. Looks like it overheated. The prompter has a hood with a drawstring, so it's sealed up. Is this fixable, or is it just an issue with all mirrorless cameras?
Nick?
So obviously that will depend on the size of the mirrorless cameras. There are plenty of mirrorless cameras which have a lens large enough to be, enveloped by that bag, but then the body of the camera is outside of that chamber. For something small like this, the only thing that I can think of is maybe purchasing a exhaust fan for a few dollars, maybe a 3-inch fan, and then you could use black air filter material behind that so that you don't have light leaking into that space. And so it would just be a matter of a DC power supply to that fan, so that ideally you're pulling air out of the chamber so that the air would come in through the various crevices around the chamber, pass over the camera on its way out, and that would draw heat off of the camera.
And my guess is that you probably have it was left on for a long period of time. I mean, it's easy for these kinds of cameras to get left on for days, weeks, months. One thing to think about also is turning stuff on and off when you're done with them, especially if heat is an issue. I have not had an Insta360 Link die, but I haven't put it inside of a teleprompter either. So that definitely could be the case. Next question.
The next question is from L. Wilson Spyro in Berlin. Has anyone got any suggestions for an affordable, low-latency wireless HDMI transmitter and receiver? It only needs to go about 4 to 5 feet, and neither the transmitter nor the receiver will be moving more than a few inches.
I think one of the questions that you have, L, is when you say low latency, what does that mean? So if you're talking about low latency 10 milliseconds or 1 millisecond, are you using a computer with it? You're just trying to jump a little bit of a space. Those are the things that you want to take a look at, because zero latency, which is what you're kind of expecting visually when you're working with a computer, usually costs a little bit more. Mickey said that secondhand Paralinx Ace 300, and there's the Teradek Ace 750. That might be for a couple feet. That might be a little overkill, but we're not afraid of overkill here. I'm trying to find, I ordered one that I've used in the past, because I think, there's a lot of, when you're talking about only jumping, a very small jump, and I just can't quite seem to bring it up, is there are HDMI. There's a lot of stuff for computers that are designed to do this, and I'm just trying to find the exact one that I have used. But if you're just trying to jump 4 or 5 feet, and a lot of them will say 100 feet. Don't believe any of that. But there are many of them. I'll just kind of jump into it. Oops, wrong button. If you look at these, a lot of these are little transmitters and receivers. They are not good for using for cameras or wireless stuff. But a lot of them, I've used quite a few of these, and it just depends on how much RF that you have in your system. But in general, they'll say 100 feet. Don't believe that, but I think that you may find that under 10 feet, a lot of these are going to be pretty effective at being able to transmit across there. So I can't find the exact one that I ordered. It might not be there anymore. But I've used those for these small jumps, and really, it depends on what resolution. Now, I've been mostly using those with 1080p solutions. I mean, most of these are, I don't know if there's some that are 4K that say they're 4K at least. So you might be able to do that. Where you get into trouble is higher frame rates, potentially big changes in the frame, that type of thing. But I've found that for small jumps, and usually I'm not jumping more than 10, 15 feet, that a lot of the transmitters that are available on Amazon will work. So those are something to think about. They're a lot less expensive than the more production-ready solutions. Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany is coming in with not a question, but a hint and update to recent office hours discussions. The Insta360 web store has, quote, big deal days, end quotes, for 9 days. You can get the original Insta360 Link standard bundle for $179.99, now less than the Link 2. Interested? And there's a link.
I think it's a pretty good deal. I'm trying not to buy any more Insta360 Links, but as a webcam, the Insta360 Link 1 is, in my opinion, we were talking about this last night on Extra Hours, much better than the Link 2. It is it was more expensive until right now, but the leveling, so the Link 2 is less expensive because they took one of the gimbals out. So it can pan and it can tilt, but it can't level itself anymore. And I think that they decided that a lot of people didn't care about that. I do. Like, I would definitely pay $50 more to have the camera level itself, rather than me having to sit there and figure out exactly how to get it perfectly square. So if at $179, this is now the price that the Brios used to be. This is an incredible deal. Like, it is the best if you're looking for a webcam, the Insta360 is the Link is the best webcam, in my opinion, that's out there. And I've got 4 of them. So I might have more by the end of the day if I think about that a little bit more. I'm only concerned that if they're doing the sale that they're, and to be specific, the link, as Mickey said, doesn't have roll, and that's the leveling that it can do. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael wonders, Behringer released the Wing Compact and Wing Rack today. Will anyone be upgrading from their X32? How will this change the mixer market? And there's a link.
I don't see myself buying a new one and replacing what I have. I will say that the new X32, the Wing rack. Let me pull it up for you here. We were looking at it last night because I think when he said today, he meant yesterday. This is the new Wing. So this is their update. They haven't updated the X32, I think, in, I don't know, 15 years, something like that. So they finally came around to doing it. It's really impressive. Again, I think that, there's definitely reasons why, I believe the QM3, or is it the QM3? From Yamaha, there's a lot of people that like that one. There's a lot of great things in it. But this is using the Midas. This new one is using the Midas preamps. It is a whole redesign of the interface, $1,600, I think. Or no, this one's $1,600, I think. This is, the old one was $800. I think this is a bit more. A lot of I/O. One of the things that we were looking at last night that we still don't fully understand, I think it's a new protocol that they're using. And you can see there's it looks like, by the way, they completely redesigned they completely redesigned the interface. So one of the things we liked about the X32 is that we thought that the X32 was a little bit more controllable remotely than the Yamaha software that was out there. And it was pretty good, but it was still quirky. It hasn't been updated in 10 years or whatever. And it was, felt old, but it was still pretty powerful. It looks like they've completely rewritten it. So there's a lot of software here that looks new. And so there's, it looks like they have a lot of control. I think they understood why people buy their hardware. And this one that's really interesting here is the Stage Connect. It's a digital pipeline for, these are some, I guess Clark Technic is using it as well. But Stage Connect allows you to digitally connect with just regular old XLR cables, and it's pushing a digital signal through that. It says 32 both ways. So I do think that, again, I don't see myself upgrading to it or changing what I have now, but for $1,500 or $1,600 for the sub $2,000 market, I think Behringer will continue to own that market with this product. I don't see how, if someone wants to spend less than $2,000, then I think that Behringer will be what they buy. And this feels really like a massive upgrade from the last X32 rack. Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin is coming in via the QR code and wonders, MP4/MOV, what's the deal? And why is MOV not as broadly supported by applications as MP4?
Go, Nick.
So the best analogy I could share is that MP4 generally is a codec, meaning an encoding and decoding system, an algorithm. And so MOV is a file container that can actually contain MP4 or any other type of media within its specifications. So there's a variety of non-MP4 coding, decoding mechanisms that can be put into an MOV file. MOV is a proprietary format from Apple, and they do license out its access to lots of organizations, lots of companies, but those companies have to buy into whatever the licensing terms are specified by Apple. So there are certainly a lot of open source tools that do interface with MOV. I mean, if I remember correctly, even FFmpeg, which is a free encoding decoding tool, can encode and decode MOV files. But essentially, MOV is the envelope in which you put the information.
I actually think that MP4s are also an envelope. Because I think what sits inside of the MP4 is the H.264, H.265. In fact, sometimes they're so closely related when it comes to H.264 and H.265 that if you change the suffix from move to MP4, MP4 to move, everything, it's just like,
it might even work.
It works. A lot of times it'll work. We change those things a lot. And Apple has its own MV4, which makes it even more complicated. So there's a lot of, but the thing about MP4s is that they're a lot easier to understand for a lot of different computers, especially PCs and Linux and so on and so forth. Yeah. Because they only are, for a long time, they were only H.264. Like that's what an MP4 did. Whereas, but it was still, I believe it was still a wrapper, but it was a wrapper around a very known format or with very limited variants. A move file can be all kinds of things, Apple ProRes and DNX and many other things.
Remember ON2?
ON2, yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of go ahead.
Yeah, I was also going to note that the publishers of various software also have to be friendly with Apple in order to be licensed to support MOV. So an interesting note is Unreal Engine can encode a QuickTime file MOV on PC, but it can't if it's running on a Mac. So
yeah, and it is a that's interesting.
I know, isn't it?
That's weird. And I misspoke. Yeah, DNX is an MXF. MXF is another format, another wrapper that you can put a lot of stuff into. And Mickey was pointing out that it's supported. It's a more supported standard for broadcast quality, production grade video. And we do see it when we get into kind of the higher end. A lot of stuff is delivered as MXF, but it's pretty rare in the general environment to see an MXF file, but it does that wrapper holds, or that container, the MXF container holds a lot more data. You can put all kinds of things into it to make it work. Next question.
David Brady in New York wonders, have a Mac studio and looking to get 3 or 4 more HDMI signals out for a video wall. What kind of expansion chassis and graphics card should I be looking at?
Nick?
So in terms of the graphics card, one of the things that you can also determine is whether you'd need a genuine GPU graphics card, or if you can use something like a Blackmagic Deck Link with HDMI outputs. It depends a little bit on the software that you're using, because if your software is capable of leveraging the power of multiple GPUs, then a GPU board makes sense. But if it's not, then
and will the GPU board work? Will the GPU board even work with a Mac? I mean, I haven't used it.
Well, I thought AMDs were compatible with Macs. They used to be.
They used to be.
At any rate, I used to have like an outboard external Thunderbolt casing that had an external PCI, and it had, this was back in when NVIDIA was in the GTX 1080 days, and so there was an equivalent AMD board, and that would work fine over a Thunderbolt cable or a USB-C cable with Mac. I haven't done that recently, but that's one way of leveraging a GPU. But the only way that makes sense is if the software that you're using is able to actually leverage the power of a second GPU versus simply calculating the imagery natively on the Mac chips and then sending the results out the outputs. And if that's going to be the case, then you can go with a less expensive Blackmagic Deck Link board that has HDMI outputs. The calculation is going to be the same on the Mac. And then assuming the software supports the Deck Link board, it can then just direct the outputs to those HDMI outputs.
Yeah, and this is, David, you are running into where this is why a Mac Pro exists. So, we can have a lot of other things there, but just remember that the Mac Pro, I think you might even be able to get all those the signals out of the USB-Cs, because those are all separate buses on the Mac Pro. The Mac Pro was built so that when people needed to get a lot more I/O out of it, they'd have it. And so I think that if you're trying to hang on to that studio and then get the more outputs, I think that what Nick said is great. If you have budget, I would probably think about a Mac Pro, just because it is built to do exactly what you're trying to do. Next question.
Mariella Shusha Miera asks via the QR code, Poe is an AI-powered mobile application designed to make digital content consumption easier and more efficient. It is available as an iOS app with an Android version in the works. How would you make use of this? It's interesting. I didn't take any of this stuff seriously for a little while because I looked at it and I was like, oh, I don't really want to converse with these things that way. But I have to say that I played with Notebook LM last night and was starting to there's been some questions about Notebook and coming up, and so I started noodling about with it. I'm just blown away. Like, I took 200 pages of PDFs and threw them into a Notebook, and it just came up with this like conversation between two people talking about the content. And it's not all the content, obviously. It's only 10 minutes it was only a 10-minute piece, but to get the gist of it. And I think that the interrogation of existing content by AI is going to be one of the most powerful things that we do with it. As I have a corpus of knowledge that I'm going to throw into that system, and then I'm going to ask it questions. So I haven't played with Poe yet. Now it looks like it's really designed to talk to ChatGPT, which I don't talk to ChatGPT, but I type ChatGPT. I talk a little bit to it, and so I haven't played with it yet. But I do think this idea of, and ChatGPT has its own chat, functions as well. But this one allows you to, I believe, abstract which AI tool that you're using as you do that, so you can have those conversations. I do think that it's pretty powerful, and I know that a lot of folks are concerned about AI, and it may end up being the overlord, but might as well enjoy the ride while it lasts. So it's a pretty powerful tool as far as acquiring information very quickly and understanding things that are in front of you. I highly recommend playing with these as much as you can. Next question. Paul Kovacs asks via the QR code, I have an FX3 with a Sony PZ 28-135 f4 lens. I have to use that I have to use as an overhead cam. The nylon stretch table cover causes a moiré effect at most zoom levels. Tried some fixes, no luck. Can't change the camera, lens, or table cover. Any suggestions?
So just make sure that the what you're looking for is the optical low pass filter is what's missing there. And I thought that the Sony had it, but the OLPF is what you're looking for. And I have to look back to see what's available for the FX3. But that optical low pass filter is going to get rid of it in that kind of moiré. It would most likely reduce it a little bit to make that possible. There's not a lot. If you can't change anything, it becomes pretty complicated to do it. If it doesn't have an OLPF, you're going to have some potential issues there. One thing that you could potentially do if you're trying to do it overhead and show things is to lift the object that you're showing a little off of the table, so that the table goes out of focus. Because that's what you really need to do is you need the table to get out of focus. So putting a little platform that might be sitting on top of that table, you may find that it is that it gets rid of that moiré because it just drops enough out of focus for that high frequency pattern to disappear. Go ahead, Nick.
Just as a bit of a novice, I was going to ask too if anyone had tried the sharpening settings, because I feel like if you overdrive sharpening, it could actually enhance the moiré, and if you could back off on any sharpening settings that might be able to help with introducing additional noticeability to that.
Yeah, 100%. So sharpening definitely could definitely make it worse. So definitely look at turning your sharpening off in the camera. Almost all cameras have sharpening on to some degree, so what they call normal, and you might set it to low or off. And you'll notice when everything looks a little out of focus. And the reason for that is that the CMOS sensor, so back when we had CCDs, you had a pixel for every pixel, red, green, and blue pixel, that was there, and they were a fair bit sharper. The CMOS sensor, all the color pixels are next to each other. And so what happens is that when you bring in the raw image, it's not really, it doesn't represent every pixel you're looking at. So one of the problems that you get, so what cameras do to fix that is to sharpen everything a little bit. So just add a little bit of sharpening to it, and that makes it look sharper. A lot of times we turn that sharpening down or off so that we can, for like green screen and stuff like that, because the problem with green screen is if I wear a black shirt in front of green screen, in one of the channels, there's a lot of contrast. And the way sharpening works, the way an unsharp mask works at least, is it's doing what we call a high pass filter. And so what it does is it does a high pass of the layer, and what that does is it accentuates the edges. And so it does it very subtly, but it makes the darker things a little darker and the brighter things a little brighter right along any time there's a contrast there. That's how that filter works. Simplified, but that's how the filter works. So what that does though is if you have green screen, if you have someone sitting in front of a green screen, you'll see a little white edge along. And if you've ever seen someone key, or if you've ever done a key and you see a little white edge along their someone's shirt, that's sharpening. So that's that white edge. You're probably trying to there was no white edge there. It was a black shirt and a green screen, and there should be no white edge. It's because of the sharpening there. So that's why you have to turn. So we know a lot about turning down sharpening, because if you're doing a key and you immediately turn it down, you're like, we'll add the sharpening later. Thank you very much. But in general production, we generally have a little bit of sharpening turned on to everything. So that sharpening, turning that off may make sense. Putting a platform on it to raise it up may also make sense. Mickey asked if you are getting moiré on the actual program out, or is it just the viewfinder, multi-finder? Because those would show moiré sometimes in a place where it may not be as evident inside of your program. So that's something also to take a look at. But I would really try to get rid of that tablecloth. The first thing I would go after, because the cheapest thing, is I will do everything I can to fix things in front of the camera. If they don't look good, I try to get rid of them. And I talk down LED walls every time I get into a project, unless you're going to give me a, zero point 0.5 or more dense LED wall, I'm going to be like, hey, you're going to end up with a lot of moiré. So I tend to push back on LED walls unless they're going to get to a 0.5 or finer as far as that goes. And so because of the same problem that you're having these moiré issues. Quick reminder, of course, is that if you want to ask questions here, you can go to, of course, Makana. If you don't know how to get to Makana, Makana's a place that you can ask the questions, you can vote on the questions, you can chat about the questions. Obviously, people are chatting about the questions right here. I'm reading them. You can also, if you want to get into that, if you don't know how to get to Makana, just go to officehours.global/join, and you can join the mailing list, and you'll start getting emails every day. And in those emails will be links to asking questions and jumping into Makana. If you don't want to do any of that stuff, you can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global and ask the questions there. Let's go into the next question.
Ron Kostuik in Toronto asks via the QR code, Zoom sessions. Does Zoom now allow editors, co-editors that are outside of the session's owner's account?
Yeah, this has been available for a little while. So there is, the answer is yes. If you become a co-editor, you can, by default, the co-editors have permission to view all the tabs. The co-editors can publish events. Co-editors can update all sections of the event creation flow. If the host designates them, the co-editor can edit published and live events, and co-editors can view and select resources from the hub's content library. I know all these things because there is a Zoom support ticket or a Zoom support page that walks through what the co-editors can and do. The couple notes there is the role is not included as a special role. The co-editors are not provided with tickets to attend the event. Co-editors do not have permission to add or remove other co-editors. Co-editors do not have to belong to the same hub or the same account as you do, and do not have to have a Zoom events license. So the answer is yes. Next question.
Harold Williams asks, how did you get the numbers in the countdown video to look so clean? There are no jagged edges.
I have to look back. I don't know. I don't know if we changed anything in those. And this might be from. I don't know whether it's from last night or this morning. The last night's is generated differently than this morning's, and so this morning's is generated, I think, by it's actually a 3D web viewer. The ones last night are generated by motion, and when I do it out of motion. With any kind of 3D text and a lot of 3D, and this might be what you're pointing towards, there's a problem with aliasing. So aliasing is and what happens is that when you think about a 3D object being rendered, there is a piece of that object that's either there or not there, when it comes to actually rendering the raw 3D object. So it is along an edge, especially along a curved edge or a slanted edge. It's in this pixel, and then the next pixel it's not. And, even though it's an infinite resolution of being a 3D object, it has to decide what pixel to render on each one of those. So the challenge there, so basically if you think about a straight, a curved line like this, there's, it's like, I got a pixel, I don't have, it's not in this pixel. And what that creates is what we call aliasing, because there's no gray levels, it's just on or off. And so the issue that we do is called oversampling. So what we do is we render it a lot bigger than it normally is going to be. So you might render, I believe I rendered the ones that I think we use for extra hours at either 4K or 8K for a 1080p playback. It might have been 8K for a 4K playback. I always do it at least twice, if not 4. So that's a 4x oversample. And then we scale it down using bicubic interpolation. And what that's going to do is bicubic's going to look at the pixels around it and decide what that pixel should be. And the effect of that is that the pixels around it blend in just a little bit to that edge. So that aliasing, that's the anti-aliasing, is what it does. Is an anti-aliasing algorithm oversamples, then rescales it, and then puts it in. It takes longer to render, which is why a lot of real-time renderers don't use it, because it would take longer to do that calculation. But more and more, we're seeing people rendering things out at 4K and then pushing them out of the pipeline at 1080p for TV and everything else if they're using Unreal or other things like that, specifically to get a little rid of that anti-aliasing. Because if you watch a lot of graphics on sports that are using Unreal Engine, one of the first things you immediately see is, well, maybe not you, one of the first things I immediately see is aliasing. so like my eye cannot see anything other than, if you put a live graphic on, my eye cannot see anything other than aliasing. If you've got aliasing on there, I just can't. I just stare at it until it goes away. I don't even read the numbers. I don't know what the score of the game is. I'm just like, look at those edges. Oh.
So Alex, I gather you're very anti-aliasing. Sorry, I couldn't help it. You just teed that up so well.
Go ahead, Jesse.
So the question that's on my mind is, what are Hollywood pictures doing to deal with anti-aliasing? Because if they're looking at 30, 50 hours per frame for render at 1080 or 4K,
oh, no, it's not,
they can't
it's not
just do it at 8K.
It's not 30 to 50 hours per frame. So typically Hollywood, and Nick can correct me, Hollywood lives in about a 45-minute per frame world. It has been 45 minutes for 30 years. So it's so what you see is more and more graphics get added and more detail gets added. But that includes the anti-aliasing that's there. So
they're not rendering at 8K, are they?
No. What they're doing, yes and no.
Actually,
yeah. So essentially what they're doing. But we don't think of it. If I'm rendering something out, like when I was rendering the Queen ship out, I don't think about rendering it 16K or whatever. I just say 4x oversampling or 8x oversampling or something. But that's what that's doing is it is rendering it at that. It's rendering every one of those frames large and then scaling it down to get that anti-aliasing. So the answer is we're not telling that we want a final frame at whatever resolution. But when we say 4x oversampling, that's what we mean. Go ahead, Nick.
So ultimately, aliasing comes down to there are pixels on the edges of foreground objects that, in theory, that the edge of that object goes through the pixel. So the engine, whatever is rendering, can do one of three things. It can either say, well, that pixel is the foreground object, or that pixel is the background, or that pixel is some calculation of however much percentage of each, and then blend those things. So aliasing usually results from the engine favoring the foreground object. So you end up with these jagged lines because if any foreground object is in the pixel gets the foreground color. And that's where you get these stepped lines because those steps are the pixels. So with feature films, they're using ray tracing systems, they're using scanline renderers, and they're evaluating every single pixel, blending whatever objects are contributing to the final color of that pixel. And so almost naturally, as part of the algorithm, you're getting an anti-aliased result because that pixel never ends up being pure foreground or pure background. It ends up having an appropriate blend of those colors. And that's part of where that 45 minutes comes from. When you're using, older versions of Unreal Engine, you would be, rendering in milliseconds per frame. And part of getting that millisecond per frame rendering time, we just like, take the foreground object and move on. And that's where that aliasing was coming. Now, these days with current GPUs and the new algorithms in Unreal, the real-time systems are able to implement various algorithms for that blending. And so there's a lot of strategies to apply anti-aliasing. So you should see that more and more improvement in both, high-end broadcast as well as streaming and those sorts of things. But that's ultimately what's going on there.
You can make, if you notice it and you notice when it's done well or badly or whatever, mostly if you know when it's done well, it's a great way to make friends with the computer artists that worked on it because none of it was done by accident, like in real time, like when you're doing real-time graphics. I was at IBC years ago, maybe 8 years ago, and at the Panasonic booth, I noticed all their real-time graphics were anti-aliased, like they were nicely anti-aliased. And I walked up to the person who's like the demo person, but it was obviously he's one of the engineers that was there. It wasn't like a real demo. Didn't feel like a demo artist. He felt like a guy who actually knew how the system ran. And I said, "Can I ask you a question?" And you got to get at NAB or IBC, it's the same question over and over and over about something that you don't really care about as a developer, but that's what you're there to do is answer those questions. And I said, how how did you get the anti-aliasing to work? And he just got his whole face lit up. It's like, because he was like, finally someone noticed. And he said, that is all the work that I have done for the last year and a half. And he started going through. We have 4 GPUs. It's a $60,000 box. It did all these things to get, he was talking about the quadrants and how he rendered the quadrants and how it had all, he got excited for like a half an hour. He sat there and broke the whole thing down for me. But you could tell, I was the only person that noticed. I think he was just dying inside that no one noticed what he had done for the last year and a half. And so just know that when you see it nicely and you don't see these little jagged things that we're talking about, someone worked hard on that. It's not an automatic flip the switch kind of thing. It's hard work. It takes a lot of rendering to get that right, especially at 30 frames a second or 60 frames a second. Next question.
Ryan Rademan in Chicago, Illinois asks, Alex, your backdrop seems more lit up than it was in the past. Is this due to a camera change or lighting?
I think maybe the camera got maybe I opened it up a little bit. What happens sometimes is I take the camera off and I put it back on, and then I change some of the settings and stuff like that. And occasionally, if I take the camera out on the road, and so it may have gotten brighter. I might have set it brighter than it was before, but I haven't changed anything with the background other than there are more lights. These are the old, they're not the whole servers anymore, but they are the front face plates for the old elementals. And when I sold I had, at one point, I probably had 30 of them, or maybe, no, not 30, I think 25 or something like that, elementals, and they were all different sizes. And Elemental had sent us new face plates because Amazon bought them, and they're now orange, which is horribly garish. And so when I sold them and I put all the orange plates on, I kept all the green ones because they were so nice. So anyway, so I've added more light things in there, a little light there, and those over there. So maybe that changed the impression of how it feels. Next question.
Joel Solomon in Mumbai, India asks, need to mirror an iPhone to demo an app on an LED wall, which will be vertically set up. Has anyone done this before, or any tips?
Go ahead, Nick.
So, of course, the most reliable way is going to be to have a hardware HDMI converter connected to your phone so that you can just tie that phone directly into the video systems. Of course, that means that the phone is no longer a wireless and easily handheld. So one of the things that I've done is installed NDI has an NDI HX app for iOS. And I think it's around $20 or something like that. And so then you can basically stream over your network, over Wi-Fi, your iPhone screen, your iPad screen, and then bring that into whatever your video setup is via NDI. So those are the two ways I bring that in. And vertically, again, it's just your downstream video equipment that needs to interpret that appropriately.
Yeah, there's two problems. One is getting the phone in there, and that's what Nick was talking about there. And I have a tendency just to AirPlay from my phone to the thing. If you're in a contested environment, it may be more complicated, and I would definitely have a hardware backup. The AirPlay, I think, will be pretty much as stable as NDI HX. I mean, because they're both using Wi-Fi if you're doing that, or if you're using Wi-Fi for that. And otherwise, the phone should just mirror itself out. Now, the problem is that you're going to get, the phone will give you a signal that is, it depends on the signal that's coming out. And I haven't tried this with a 4K output, so I don't know what the phone will do if you're setting to a 4K screen, because if you have a 4K iPad, theoretically the iPhone is going to come in the center and it's going to be 2160 high, which would be more than the 1080 that you might need. But you're going to end up with this big frame with all this black on it if you're doing vertical. So what you're going to need is something that's usually some software that's going to manage that against the LED wall. So I don't know what tools that they're having, but I'm sure that they have one of the media servers that's there. It could be something like Resolume, Arena, or Aluminum, there's or other things that will let you map these out. I believe even stuff like, I believe that QLab has some mapping, but I'm not 100% sure of that. Also, things like Isadora would have mapping so that it could take that and map it on an output. But the problem that you're really going to get into is that you need it to be sitting inside the LED wall or being fed into that, because it has to send those pixels to it. But something's going to have to crop that out. And again, I haven't tried a 4K, an iPhone vertical to a 4K monitor, and whether that's sharper or not. That would be the thing to look at. Next question.
Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas asks, what are moderate-priced tripods, monopods, etc. for a Sony ZV-E10 for all-around use, including an exercise class?
Go ahead, Nick.
So I apologize, I don't have my screen share tied in right now, but for this sized camera, it's a tiny little camera, I actually like Oben as they have a whole line of very lightweight, very transportable tripods that can extend quite tall. So they collapse really small, and they fit into a little bag that they come with that's maybe 18 inches long. So super, super portable. I use them for travel, etc. And they are quite rigid, certainly rigid enough for a tiny camera like that. So Oben, I don't know, maybe the CT3535 or the 3565 is a carbon fiber version of that, because they do have a center column, so you can really get lots of height out of them. I would not use these cameras or these tripods for anything that's like a full-size SLR body or higher, but for something small like this Sony, that should be great.
Yeah, the one that I use a lot I have a larger or kind of a medium-sized one called a Mi Photo. This is like for that type of camera. I use it for a lot of my spherical stuff. I use it for, and I think I have the Globetrotter is the one that I use. Little things about it that I like. It's a ball head, so you have to decide whether you need a ball head on it or whether you need a fluid head. So the ball head means you're just going to loosen it. It's got a ball, and you can kind of level it off. A fluid head means that it's going to, it sits on the top of the tripod, and it is, now you have a handle and you can pan and tilt and all those other things, and you have to decide whether you need that or not. There's a couple things with a fluid head. On the less expensive fluid heads, they're going to attach with a 3/8 to the sticks, and the problem is that you don't really have any way to level them. For the less expensive ones, they don't sit on a big ball head. They go out, and you have to kind of mess with the sticks to get it to be level, which is really kind of a bummer. As you go up another step, you're going to end up with a ball assembly, which basically has a 75 or a 100 or there's a 150 millimeter ball that sits inside of it, and that head is going to come down into it. And now you can loosen it. You can loosen it at the bottom, and you have usually on those heads, you're going to have a leveler. You're going to have a little bubble, and you can sit there and move them around until that is level. That way your sticks can be close. They just need to be close, and then you're going to level it inside the head. So you just got to, and now again, you can fix all of that if you have a ball head that is, if you have a ball head on that's all you have in that tripod. But panning and tilting with the ball head is really hard. so I would say close to impossible. So you probably don't want to necessarily do that. So those are your options. The ball head. For what you're doing. Again, I think that you can probably find some pretty good options under $200 if you're willing to spend up to $200. I use a lot of the Obens that Nick is talking about, but usually the ones I use are really small, and I use them underneath some of my monitors and stuff like that. But the Oben makes great tripods as well. Next question.
Pedro G. Gonzalez III in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma asks, if you are in the market for a new digital mixer, would you recommend the Behringer Wing Rack or the Yamaha DM3-D, and why?
I think it would depend on what you needed it for. Mickey says that if you need to actually mix and go with one of the actual faders, between the two, the only upside of the Wing Rack is the channel count. And so if you need a lot more channels, I do think that you're going to probably find, I don't think that Yamaha has updated their software yet. So if software control is something that's there, I think you may want to think about comparing those two. Because it looks like Behringer rewrote all the software, which could be good or it could be bad, horrible. But it definitely looks like an updated interface from what I saw there. I would try to get a hold of both of them and see how they feel. There's a Wing Rack. I will always go towards the Wing Rack because I don't like having all of my I/O going into my mixer. Like, I just hate that. So I know it works for other people, but I'm loading in all the time, and so I want an Ethernet cable that runs it. I want to put the rack somewhere, because usually and this, again, this is how you mix things. If you're used to setting a mixer down and running everything into it, then it's fine to do, and make that work. For me, I'm used to that mixer being installed into a road case, and all the I/O that it needs to manage with audio and convenience panels and everything else are in that road case. And I want people to plug stuff into the back, and I can't do that with a mixer that has all the I/O on the back of it. So I don't particularly like to do that. So and Mickey does point out that there's stage boxes for that, but then that's another cost. So you have to decide what you want to buy. And we use the X32 as a stage box. So anyway, next question.
Rajan Shandil in Los Angeles, California asks, any positive thoughts on use cases for a motorized slider for cameras? Audio concerns?
Go ahead, Nick.
So I think they're great for getting like a continuously moving wide shot that you can get from as an extra camera, especially if you have a small team. One of the nice things about using it in this setting is that you can set the dolly and such quite a bit away from your subject and use like a longer lens with that. And ideally, it's a system that is capable of just being told, I want you to oscillate and I want you to keep the lens pointed here, because this keeps both, let's say we're doing a two-person interview across, seated across from each other. You want to keep that, both of those folks in view throughout that whole oscillation. If you have a small crew, it's, the person that's on-screen talent and maybe one other, you can have the one other operating a camera, in response to how the conversation's going. You could have two fixed cameras as being your over-the-shoulder looking, one for each full-frame shot, close-up of each person participating. And then you just have this extra go-to angle that you can get to, and you'll get some nice... If you set the speed low and you're distant enough from your microphones, it will be effectively silent. So I use a really old and not a high-end system myself. It's a Syrup Genie, and I don't even know if they're still available, or they're really inexpensive. And it's almost silent, and especially in the context of, okay, there's air conditioning on and fans on for various equipment. So really, in terms of noise, it's the least concern. So anyway, there's my experience.
Go, Jesse.
And the two little bits, hints, tips, and tricks that we've got are only use the middle part of the slider. Don't ever show when it comes to the end and the camera stops and changes direction. That feels pretty tacky. And we cut to the automatic slider very rarely, like 5 times throughout an hour-long interview, because every time you cut to it, you increase the chances of the audience starting to go, oh, they're on the motorized slider now.
Yeah, I do agree that it's something you use in very small amounts. One of the things that we've had for years is this is the one-man crew director motorized camera slider. Now it has a little bit of a curve to it. You have to get it just at the right distance to make that work, so that the tangent is perpendicular to its axis. But it is. But if you put it there, it's a great little thing that just goes back and forth, as was said before. I don't think it works very well for live. If you're doing stuff for live, the problem you get into is exactly what Jesse pointed out, which is that you cut to it and it just got to the end of where it was going. So that's a little bit more problematic. As you look at larger ones, one of the things that we've done with motorized sliders is what I love doing is creating like kind of a dirty shot with it, which means that I've got heads in front of me because it creates a lot more depth. So what you'll do is you'll have, I like to have, like we had a show that, our guests are up here and we have all these people sitting here, and we like to put the camera here, and rather than getting a clean shot, we get a wide shot and we see all the audience in front of us across the bottom. Gives you a little bit of like you're there kind of, cut. And if you put that on a slider, which we'll probably do on the next one, you just get this little push where it's kind of going past those heads. And that creates, I think it creates more movement And so it's one of those things. I will admit that I don't use sliders that often because I feel like I like it when it does that. The question I've had recently is really dealing with what we think is cool versus what the viewer really cares about. And I think that the more I do this, the more I'm trying to get into the person's, when we talk about, I mean, there is style that you want to have, but when is it form over function, kind of thing. And, I do think that there is something about feeling like you're there or feeling that angle, but more and more, I kind of want to keep it as simple as possible. And sliders do, one of the things they take a little bit of time to set up, even if they're quick. And a lot of times if I'm setting up, I go, do I really want to expend more time on that or lighting? Go ahead, Jesse.
Just wanted to second what you said. The importance of the curve on that slider cannot be overstated. If you get just straight tracks, you're going to leave them in the closet 90% of the time. That curve is absolutely necessary for a good slider shot.
Next question.
The next question comes from Eduardo Augustine in Panama City. Thoughts on this portable power station? Valid purchase for small productions, and there's a link.
So this is the EcoFlow, and here you can see it here. This looks good. I mean, you have to kind of start looking at what you're trying to produce. There's quite a few manufacturers of these. I don't. DJI is actually making these now, and so you kind of have to decide, how much power do you need. Also think about, and EcoFlow does have this. How is it going to integrate into solar? So how is solar delivered to it? And how is other power delivered? How does it recharge? So those are things that you want to think through. But it does look like EcoFlow has a pretty good environment to work in. But I will say that I'm far from an expert in doing that. So I'm not certain. It's something that's on. I have lots of little ones for emergencies. I have not really gotten into power stations just because I travel. If I need one of these, I'm traveling, and when I'm traveling, they're really heavy. It's a battery. So yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to question that, again, I don't actually use these. So I'm curious that, it looked like most of the outputs are USB style outputs, and those cables tend to be quite short. And the other thing I noticed is there's a couple fan vents, be careful of the jet wash. So I'm just, wondering how far away from all of your audio equipment can you keep this station and it still be effective? I mean, I imagine you can use it to charge batteries and such, but if you're using it to run a laptop or power a camera or something like that, it seems to me like you'd have to get it quite close versus a power station that had a 120 outlet.
So I think it does have a 120 on it. I think that they're just not showing it in that image. They have. They have plugs on. They do have plugs on them. They just didn't show it in that. If you see it here, someone's plugging something into it right there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely. It is interesting to your point though that it doesn't. No, it says AC input. It's got to have. Now, I don't think to your point though. I don't know if this is. I think this is more designed to go camping with than it's designed to do production with. You can see that they have other ones that are much more, definitely show, like if you look at the next one up, you definitely see power. So to Nick's point, I don't know if that one has, I think Nick might be right. I don't know.
The first time for everything.
I've never seen one this big. Maybe it's much smaller than I expected. It's pretty small. But it looks like it's really just designed to power your. I don't see anywhere. Just looking for. It's gotta. I mean,
they're clearly marketing for more of outdoor.
It says outlets. The outlets are 15, so there's got to be. We're only seeing a handful of those, so I think it's really poor packaging. Yeah, we'd have to look at it deeper another time. So, the next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle asks, NAB New York and Zoomtopia tomorrow. Anything exciting to be on the lookout for?
wherever Andy's speaking. That's what we're excited about. So we're just going to look at. I'm sure that he'll have announcements that he hasn't been able to tell us up until now. So right after this, we're hoping to get Andy on after Zoomtopia, whatever I don't know what they are, but I think that so that's what I'm paying the most attention to. NAB New York doesn't usually have that many announcements that are custom to it. We have told the folks that we work with, hey, if you're doing an announcement, let us know. But usually the big announcement days are NAB Vegas and IBC. And so, NAB New York is close enough to IBC that we don't usually expect to see anything new at NAB New York, but we'll see. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, would there be a quality webcam-size camera like the Insta360 with an HDMI output?
There are, I think OBSBot makes some that have HDMI out, but they don't have, I don't think what we've seen is one that has 3 axes of rotation as well as an HDMI output at that price point or that size. So I think that's the challenge. But I think I don't think it does it. I don't think it has a lot of competition in that area, but I don't know of any that will really then give you all the controls that you want. As soon as you connect it to something else, it doesn't have that. But OBSBot, I think, does have some that may not have all those features, but have pretty high quality cameras. Next question.
The next question is from Rajan Shandil in Los Angeles, California. With the rise of the creator economy, why are camera manufacturers not partnering with great audio companies to make our lives easier?
Go ahead, Nick.
So I guess I would say Sony is a camera company that is also an audio company. So I don't know that
to some degree.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I get where. It is. I mean, Sony has some audio products, but not when it comes to mixers and so on and so forth, they're not.
And then there's Blackmagic, acquiring Fairlight
to some degree. But then they give us these minis with 1/8-inch jacks. So I will say I have finally got it to work well with my Mini Extreme. I have 1/8-inch jacks that go out to XLR, and those XLRs connect to a Avio, so it's Ethernet to XLR output. And then that plugs into an Ethernet cable. So now I have an Ethernet cable. Now anything I need, anything on the Dante network, I can just route to my switcher. So it definitely simplified that pipeline. It's a relatively good, elegant way to get stuff in. And once I've leveled it all out, run -20 through everything, make sure that everything's doing what I expect it to do. It's pretty good audio.
The other thing I was going to throw in is that everyone has their favorite, right? So as a camera company, I wouldn't want to necessarily exclude a swath of my potential market by saying, well, we're partnering with this audio company exclusively or something like that, because everyone that takes a different audio path is going to be sad about you.
And a lot of people are working on it. DJI is working really hard on the wireless. You see Rode doing their own solution. Deity is using their own solution. There are some audio out there. The hard part is figuring out what the price point that people are willing to pay. I really still think every time I do have someone remote on, I'm like, somebody needs to build a solution so that we can completely control it remotely. Like I just think that there's such a huge opportunity for a box that lets me just go, I'm going to plug an Ethernet into it. And it's got maybe an SD card built into it or something. But the bottom line is the box does, I control everything about it. It's got an XLR input. You plug the mic in, and and you could connect it to a computer, USB, and it becomes an interface, or it just got a headphone out and you just plug it in and it just connects you over the internet to somebody else with one of those boxes and just does the whole thing.
Isn't that like an ATEM constellation, like a 1 rack unit item?
No, I mean, this I think you could build this into something that was like a desktop thing that's tiny because it's just, and it's not as expensive and all those other fun things. By the way, I'm curious, if you haven't seen our email for a while, I'm going to give you we have new Q&A images rather than the same one every single time. We're relaxing it. Let us know what you think if you like them. The voting is going in. We thought we'd have a little bit more fun with it than what we normally do. So let us know what you think there. You can also put it into Mukana, or not Mukana, but into RFI, and let us know what you think. But it looks like the overwhelming folks enjoy it. I just didn't want to have the same thing over and over again. Now we're going to send some of these questions back. I thought we were going to finish at 7:20 at the rate we were going. A lot of people sent the questions back. A reminder that you can always, when we send the questions back to you, if you did it over QR code, it'll just come back in. If you put it in, it goes into your notes. You can bring it back the next day. So we got through it today, but of course you can bring those questions back tomorrow. Tomorrow, of course, is our audio day. So if you've got audio questions, even the same ones you asked today, you can try it then. All right. Have a good afternoon, good day, good morning. That's good.
Fun stuff.
As they say in Japan, gaman shite kurete arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you for enduring everything I did today.
Oh, that's good. That's great. Nick, have you seen Meshi.ai?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Rick showed it yesterday, and I've become kind of obsessed. It was an expensive show for me.
I'll take a look.
You can give it a prompt, or you can give it an image, and it will pump out a 3D model. Like
nice.
They're not perfect models, but as like placeholders or previs or whatever, it's pretty cool.